How do you scale your high ticket dropshipping business to six figures of revenue per month? Well, let's talk about it in this video. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. If you are new, subscribe for daily high ticket dropshipping content. If you are someone that is serious about building a high ticket dropshipping business in 2025, I recommend checking out my program. The link is in the description below. My second course is coming out in just a few days from now, and the current version of the course, if you buy it at the current price, you'll be grandfathered in to the new course at no additional cost, and this only lasts a couple more days. So if you want to get in at a much lower price, I would recommend getting in now. And then on top of that, my Google Ads service and my supplier acquisition service are also in the description below. But let's talk about how you scale a high ticket dropshipping business to six figures of revenue per month. Maybe the first question is this even possible? Well, if it wasn't, I wouldn't be talking about it in this video because I've done it myself. I have known plenty of people in the space, people in my program, people that I've done it as my peers alongside of, and it is definitely possible. Now, there are a lot of things that also have to go your way when you get into this business. And biggest thing at the end of the day is your niche. Unequivocally, period, end of story, your niche is the most important part when it comes to the scalability, the viability of actually building and scaling a high ticket dropshipping business. And then different variables like your Google Ads, your SEO, your website, your product pages, all of your conversion factors. There are lots of variables to this, but at the end of the day, there's an element of luck as well. So keeping all of that in mind, let's kind of talk about from going from zero to $100,000 per month, how that actually happens and how do you continue to scale once you've reached that point? And is there a glass ceiling? So the first part of this is obvious. You have to identify what actually sells in your niche. So, you might be in a niche where you have a large catalog. And personally, I really prefer niches that have a lot of closely related products, within a catalog to where you have the ability to pivot. You have a large ability to pivot, or you have a lot of individual keywords that you can organically rank for over time. It's a lot of work. And at first it's kind of overwhelming because you don't know exactly like what direction to take your business in. But at the end of the day, you have to kind of cast a wide net at that point and just kind of figure out from a data perspective, what is actually converting, what's keeping people on the website for longer. And the way that you do this is, at least up front with Google Ads. I think there is a strong argument for some sort of a catch-all campaign, whether that is standard shopping or whether that is Performance Max. I think there's an argument for some low bid catch-all campaigns just to kind of collect data for a couple of weeks and see what are people actually interested in on my website. And assuming over the course of, let's say, 2 to 3 weeks, you start getting some pretty meaningful data as far as like what are the most common search terms that I'm getting clicks for. Ideally, what are some add to carts that I'm getting? And even more ideally, what has someone actually purchased in this time since I've been advertising my products? And let me be clear, when I say catch-all campaign, there's going to be times when you have things on your website that are like, $50 products. I'm not talking about advertising these. I'm saying advertise everything in your catalog that costs $1,000 or more, because when you advertise on Google, you have to make it worth it with the margins, with the money you actually make per sale in order to pay the amount it costs on Google for each click. Google is the most expensive click in the world. And there's a good reason for that. It's because you have the potential to make thousands of dollars on a single sale just from somebody clicking on your ad at the right time. And so companies are always going to be willing to bid a lot of money per click. But at first, you're just kind of testing the waters to see what's actually potentially working here. So let's say over the course of a month or two, you've identified a couple or maybe even just one product line. Maybe it's one product type or a couple of product types within your general niche umbrella that you've seen gain some traction. Well, I have always been of the opinion that even if you have a very specific plan going into high ticket drop shipping, you have to just lean into what's working. I really like the Mike Tyson quote, as silly as it is. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Well, my plan when I first got into high ticket dropshipping was to scale to 6 figures of revenue per month selling greenhouses. And funny thing is, I never sold a single greenhouse, even though I carried several suppliers on my website. It turned out something else I was carrying on my website sold way, way more. So I leaned into that. At the end of the day, like I said, there's just an element of luck here. And once you've identified something that's working, lean into that, especially if the margins make sense and especially if it seems like it's not just like a one-off fluke. Like, I'm a statistics major, and well, I was when I was in college. I have my statistics degree. And if you've ever taken a stats course before, you understand the importance of a sample size, the law of large numbers. Okay, the larger sample size you have, the more statistically significant data points become. And when you only have a couple orders, your sample size is pretty dang small. But over the course of time, over the course of, let's say, a couple months, when you've had, a couple thousand people land on your store, when you've had ideally more than 30 to 40 add to carts and, several orders, from there you kind of start to get a good data picture as far as what's actually converting and lean into that. And so from here, how you scale and how you lean into this and really use this to your advantage really kind of depends on your situation in life. If you already have a full-time income stream, which I did when I got started, I had a full-time job. I worked in sales for a tech company. And so I had no problem not taking any money out of my business and just putting it back in. And so what this meant at the time specifically was scaling my advertising budget. The more you spend on advertising, the more people can land on your store, the higher chance you have to sell more products. It's the easy math of scaling a business like this. And so over the course of time, once you've identified what's working, I would say lean into that. Maybe start changing the branding on your website. As far as let's say you have identified within your niche let's say you have a large catalog. You've got like 10 different closely related product types. I've been using the civil engineering equipment example lately. So let's say you carry total stations and GIS stations. I think those are different things, and laser levelers, and like 7 other civil engineering things. Well, they're all closely related, but it turns out the total stations really sell well. Okay. So, you can, over the course of time, keep your store as a general civil engineering equipment store. Or there's also an argument, in my opinion, to maybe start changing the branding to more focused on total stations, because you've realized total stations really work. They're by far selling way more than anything else that you carry. It starts to make sense. Like maybe your tagline on your logo, something along the lines of mentioning how you're a total stations supplier or distributor or dealer, something along those lines. Just identifying what's working and making your branding lean into that as well. And then from there, once you've identified the product line that is selling well, I think it makes sense to start getting more suppliers within that product line. Or ideally, you have 2 or 3 product lines that it turns out they're selling pretty dang well on Google. So I would say the next step is kind of maximize your suppliers that produce those particular things. And if there are certain brands that you just cannot get in the door with, but would be a game changer, I would say seek out distributors if possible. Some niches, distributors aren't as prevalent as others, but a really lucrative part of working with a third-party distributor, even though you sacrifice the margins, is you get access to a lot more brands, oftentimes really big brands that only established companies have the ability to partner with. So beyond just, maximizing your supplier base and maximizing your catalog with this particular product line, at the same time, you're continuing to scale your ads budget, assuming you're not paying yourself. And then from there, over time, I would say one of the biggest game changers for me in my first year of high ticket dropshipping was when I discovered just how being aggressive with my Google ads, and I'm not saying reckless, I'm saying being more aggressive can be a night and day difference. So I've told the story a few times on the channel, but a huge game changer for me was when I went from spending $1 per click, $100 per day. So if you do the math, that's 100 people landing on your store per day. Well, I was comfortable with that amount of traffic, but what I wanted to do was I wanted to up the ante for a week and just test the waters and see what happens. So what I did, and I was comfortable with it because I was like, you know what, if I don't see a return from this, that's fine. I'm comfortable sacrificing this week's amount of ads budget just for this experiment. And so I basically tripled my budget from $100 a day to $300 per day. And at the same time, I proportionately scaled my bids on my clicks. So I went from $1 per click to $3 per click. So $3 per click, $300 per day. That means still 100 people. But ideally, those 100 people are higher converting because my ads are showing up higher consistently in Google Ads. And sure enough, my experiment paid off because I had roughly a $60,000 a week right off the bat. And that was the most kind of eye-opening thing for me early on. Other than like things, I mean, there was a lot that was eye-opening for me as far as properly designing a website, optimizing a product page, actually, marketing your entire business towards whatever niche that you're trying to compete in and coming off as a specialist. But from a marketing standpoint, from just a pure paid advertising standpoint, when I discovered that once I know what sells and being aggressive with my Google ads, that was really the start of something pretty extraordinary for me. And I followed that principle just over the next several months, and eventually in month 8, I scaled to $100,000 per month, and that continued for the remainder of my business until I ended up selling it in 2023, this particular business. Now, what I haven't even mentioned yet is search engine optimization. If you ask me, if you ask a lot of people in this business, what is something they could go back and do differently? Well, where do I even begin? One of the biggest things, if not the biggest thing, that could I go back to myself in 2020 when I was young and impatient about making money online and, making an income that could replace my 9-to-5 income. Something I did not respect at the time or have an appreciation for was the importance of quality SEO. Now, I'm not only talking about the basics of optimizing your website images, adding alt text to them, or standardizing the image size across your product pages, or your website speed, limiting the amount of apps that you're using, limiting the amount of JavaScript on your website. All of these things are important. A good user experience, mentioning a certain keyword here and there throughout a particular page, just because it's kind of like, well, I've heard if I use a keyword enough times on this page, then I'll organically rank for it at a certain point. Well, it turns out there's a lot more to it than just that. There is a lot more to it than just that. And I don't even know where to begin to describe all the things that can be done, especially early on, to rank for a certain keyword over time, from both on-site SEO to linking to technical SEO. And a lot of this is covered, luckily, in my new program that's coming out in a few days from now by my partner, Lisa Whaley, who has 20 years of SEO experience. She has been fascinating to work with. And luckily for you guys that just subscribe to the YouTube channel, we're going to have some podcasts coming out together specifically talking about SEO, the importance of it for high-ticket dropshipping. So where it becomes important for scaling your high-ticket dropshipping business, I think the reason it's so important is obvious, is because once you begin to organically rank for a specific keyword, let's say I'm ranking for the word total stations for civil engineering. And, let's say I'm ranking like somewhere in the top 10. Well, let's say I'm getting 30 to 50,000 visits on my website per month now that previously I would have had to pay a lot of money for. Now it's free. now I've ranked organically, and that is going to stick there a heck of a lot longer than trying to constantly battle and rank at the very top of Google Ads. The reality of Google Ads is the competition is volatile. If you've scaled your business, if you have a large budget, you are a lot more equipped to be consistently at the top of the Google Ads, but there's always going to be competition that comes in, and it changes a lot more quickly than SEO does. The challenge of SEO is it takes a while to get there, but once you're there, it takes a while for you to go away. And that's where you become really dangerous as a business. And that's when we begin talking about a business that's worth 7-8 figures. Okay. Because it is a lot easier to sell a revenue generating asset online that doesn't solely rely on paid advertising. If you have something that is organically and basically passively bringing in traffic and generating revenue through converting customers, you have something extremely valuable on your hands. And the power of SEO cannot be understated. So to kind of bring this back to how do you scale to 6 figures per month in high ticket dropshipping, there's several things that you can do along the way. My biggest pieces of advice are stay patient with it. You're not going to know exactly what sells right off the bat unless you get really, really lucky. It's going to take some testing. It's going to take patience, and it might take a little bit of money on the front end. Ideally, you identify it. Ideally, you don't have to pay yourself from whatever the business makes, and you can keep reinvesting it to continue to scale it. You build your supplier base around whatever it is that's working, and you develop your SEO along the way. I cannot harp on that enough. And ultimately, you lean into what's working. At the end of the day, I think that's kind of the most important principle to take away from here. Despite what any metrics tell you on whatever, search volume or keyword data, I'm not saying that stuff is not important, but you just cannot know what's going to work until you get started. And so my biggest piece of advice is along all of that is to just lean into what's working. That's going to be all for this one. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for daily high-ticket dropshipping videos. And if you are serious about becoming a high-ticket dropshipping business or building your own, I recommend checking out my program. The link is in the description below. We'll see you guys tomorrow.